Awesome. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another interview on the Future Proof Your Law Firm Facebook group. Today we have another little bit of a non-traditional interview with a awesome guy. Really excited to have him here. His name is Jacob Tighe from the Russell and Tighe Law Group PC. And we are actually doing a little bit different because he is on a phone. So if you hear him, you're going to hear his audio, but just see my gorgeous face this morning. So thank you so much for being here, Jacob. If you could give a brief introduction of yourself and what your firm specializes in, I think that would be a great way to start.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, as you said, my name is Jacob Tighe. I've been primarily doing debtors bankruptcy work for the last 7 years. On the side, I also do a bit of Social Security disability and just a scotch of divorce.
Gotcha. a little dash of this, a little dash of that. That's good. Is there a reason why you've been focusing on the areas you've been focusing on? Just like it's just kind of the way the business has been heading, or you're a little bit more passionate about that area, or
Well, I started out here, and that's what they did, and then I just kind of grew into taking over that department, and now that's what I do. It's not something that I've steered the ship towards, but I'm happy with where it's landed.
Gotcha. No, that's awesome. That's very good to hear. And you're in the Grand Rapids area, right?
Yes.
And I know, so I'm on the eastern side of Michigan, for anybody who wasn't familiar. And, the shutdown has been pretty tough in Michigan in compared to some other areas. So I'd love to know, over the past year, how has your kind of daily work life within your law firm changed from what it was before the shutdown, and then what happened during the shutdown, and then now that things are starting to uh, kind of ease off a little bit? How have things changed?
Yeah. Well, the state restrictions that got put on everybody, they hurt everybody. We were hurt mostly because the district courts shut down, which meant that creditors weren't getting their lawsuits through. Landlords couldn't kick out their tenants. There were no evictions. So the desire and need for bankruptcy pretty much dried up throughout 2020 simply because there were no consequences to not paying debt. In addition, we had a lot of money flowing from the government. You had all of the unemployment expansion and those sorts of things, which really helped to prevent people from needing a bankruptcy. So we took a big wash in 2020. But now that things are kind of opening up again, the government has thoroughly destroyed most of the small businesses, meaning there are less jobs available. And creditors have woken back up. They've got their garnishments flowing again. They're snagging bank accounts. We're seeing a huge explosion in the number of bankruptcies getting filed, and we expect that to continue probably for the next year or two.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. Yeah, I was just yesterday, I had an interview with a lady out in California, and her name was Patricia, and she for a while was really focused in like real estate law. But because of everything that happened during COVID, there weren't as many people, kind of like what you said with evictions and everything. So she kind of shifted what she was doing. But I'm glad you guys are kind of on the up and up now that things have really started to get back to kind of the way they were. And I've been asking everybody this, and I might be able to, kind of see with what you're saying. I know before this call, we were talking about, joining a virtual court. Are you a fan of the virtual court, or kind of having a hybrid type model, or are you really looking forward to when things can maybe go back to completely how they were the way before?
Personally, I'm a bit of an optimistic person, so whatever situation I'm given, I try to enjoy. And I've really been enjoying virtual meetings. Um, Being able to call in means that I'm not spending time traveling. I'm not getting dressed up in a suit and feeling uncomfortable all day. I'm not paying for parking. The hearings are faster, and I'm able to do stuff while on mute that I wouldn't be able to do while sitting in the waiting area.
Yeah.
So overall, it's been great. I would actually not complain if most court hearings, and in our case, bankruptcy 341 hearings, just decided to stay telephonic.
Sure. Yeah, no, and I think like you said, I think there's definitely a lot of pros to it. Because like you said, I think it can kind of streamline a lot of processes and save people a lot of time. and really allow people to make the most out of their day, like you said, because one of the biggest time wasters I feel like people don't even realize that they have is just traveling to and from someplace. That can take up a lot of time for people that you could be doing spending a lot more productive things. So that makes sense, and I wouldn't be surprised if we did really continue down this virtual format for at least a little while, and stay in that state for quite some time, because it's impacting not just the courts, but everywhere, other workplaces, schools, having this virtual kind of new lifestyle is something I think is going to stay for probably a while at least.
Oh, absolutely. Especially with the types of hearings that I do, your uncontested divorce pro-con hearings and your bankruptcy 341 hearings, which are just a formality that you have to get on the record because the statute says so, but nothing matters. It's great to do those over the phone. Now, if you're doing something like a deposition or something criminal, I definitely understand why
Hmm.
someone would want to be there in person. But for what I'm doing, it's all a formality. We just need to check that box. So
Yeah.
it's great to be able to do it on the phone.
Yeah, definitely. And that was actually something I was just going to say, is that I know, again, some of the people I've talked about is that it does kind of, go maybe on a little bit more case by case basis, because for some cases, it's probably more important to, see how the people are reacting to certain things and have them more in person setting. So I definitely, again, would not be surprised if those types, started returning at least to maybe video or more in person instead of just having over the phone. So that makes sense for sure. Something I wanted to ask Jacob is, when it comes to bankruptcy in your firm, how long have you guys been around for? I forgot to ask.
We've been around for probably a good 10 years. I've been here about 7.
Oh, gotcha. What did you do before you were at this law firm?
This is actually my first real legal job.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
I was a law clerk at a few places. I interned at a few places, but this was the first practicing place.
Oh, nice. And what made you want to get into the legal field?
Well, that's actually a bit of a funny story. I was in college. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I took one of those really long, intense guidance counseling tests where they decide what you want to do, what you should do,
Hmm.
and lawyer ended up being number 2 on the list. So I went for that one because number 1 was a magician, and I just didn't think I could make ends meet with that.
Yeah, maybe not. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I remember taking one of those before. And I think my number one was like zookeeper or something like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny that they have those on those lists. Because it's like, yes, that could be a career, but like, the options, the difference, magician or attorney, I think it can kind of skew people in a direction. That's funny though. Well, that's cool. No, that's very interesting. Where'd you go to school?
I went to Grand Valley State here in Michigan, and then I went to Cooley, also in Grand Rapids.
Gotcha. Awesome. Yeah, I have a cousin who just graduated from Grand Valley, and he kind of really liked the Grand Rapids area. I haven't been there in a while. I went there a couple of years ago. I was in the city and then I was out really quickly, so I definitely want to come back. But to kind of recenter, something I wanted to ask about the firm itself. When it comes to people finding you guys, especially with bankruptcy, I mean, is it something where people just look up bankruptcy attorney in Grand Rapids and they find you, or is it mostly like word of mouth through referrals?
We do get a lot of those referrals, which are great. But the number one thing is people who don't even know that they're looking for bankruptcy. They get paid one day and they notice their paycheck has a big chunk missing from a garnishment, or they get a summons on their door. And so they run to Google and they say, how to stop a garnishment, or what to do if you get hit with a lawsuit.
Mhm.
And eventually that leads them to the keyword of bankruptcy. And then they cite bankruptcy Grand Rapids. And we try to be near the top of that list.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. And I think that's a very fair point that you said, because a lot of people, when they think about, how people are finding me, sometimes it isn't as immediate as searching right away for, bankruptcy attorney near me. There might be a couple steps ahead of it, which I think is important to kind of keep in mind when you're thinking about your, potential customer's journey or whatever. So that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. Most people don't even know what bankruptcy is or what it does, and I'm sure that that applies to a lot of different areas of law where you want to try and make sure the worm says something they're looking for so that they can find it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, on that topic, why don't you clarify some of the biggest misconceptions you hear when it comes to bankruptcy, what it is, why somebody needs to speak to a bankruptcy attorney, etc.
Oh yeah, a lot of the misconceptions that come out with bankruptcy are actually things meant to scare people away from it. So you think, oh, you're going to lose all your stuff. You're not going to be able to get tax refunds. You're going to get taxed on the amount that gets discharged. You're never going to be allowed to buy a house or a car or use a credit card, or your credit's going to take a hit, or all of those things. But in reality, for 99.9% of the cases that I file, no one loses anything. You keep all your stuff. You get flooded with car loan and credit card offers because you can't file again for 8 years, so they really want to get those garnishments. And so there's really almost no downside. As long as the person looking at your case is able to identify potential hiccups before you file,
Hmm.
I recommend it most of the time. In fact, I've got my own file ready to go in case on the way home I get in a big car accident. I can be filed in 15 minutes.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. No, and I appreciate you saying that because I think that's definitely something that people they hear the word bankruptcy and immediately are scared. That it's the end of the world for them. But I think, like you said, as long as it's done correctly, there can be a not so scary way to go about it. No, that makes sense. Definitely, definitely. And I'm
Yeah,
curious.
it certainly doesn't help that the end condition of monopoly is called bankruptcy, or the picture you picture is someone in a barrel with no stuff. But
Yeah.
in reality, you keep all your stuff. That's almost never an issue.
Definitely. No, I think I think there's definitely a lot of misconceptions, and I hope people can kind of see that. And I bet with everything that's going on and increase in people wanting to maybe pursue that, more and more people are probably going to go ahead and kind of see those new things once they start speaking to someone. And kind of, I'd love to do this for a plug for you guys. If somebody is looking to speak to a bankruptcy attorney, why would, besides being in the right area, why would they want to reach out to you guys?
Absolutely. So the number one most important thing is going to be the price. The bankruptcy process itself, as long as you've done a few of them, any lawyer is going to do a great job at a bankruptcy. But you want to get in and out for a decent price. We personally charge $9.99, and then the court has their filing fee of $3.38. But you see prices that range everywhere from the lowest I've seen in the area is $8.99, and the highest I've seen as high as $2,000-$3,000, which it's definitely not worth $2,000-$3,000. But
Mhm.
the biggest thing you're looking for is price and that they're conveniently located, I think.
Yeah. No, no, no. And I think, like you said, because a very reasonable price that makes a lot of sense. And hey, if anybody's listening in the Grand Rapids area, or check this out, and you're looking for a bankruptcy attorney, make sure you go ahead and I linked your website in there, so you can go ahead and do that. As I wrap this up, I want to ask a couple questions. For in the future, looking towards the future, where are you guys, besides just really starting to get going with the bankruptcy again? Are there any areas where you guys are looking to grow or kind of make changes this year based on what happened in the past?
You know, I've always open to trying out new areas. There are a few that have popped up that I've had some curiosity in. I was really interested in workman's comp for a while because that paired well with Social Security. Anything with administrative stuff is really a treat for me. But because of what happened in the last year, with you never know when the government's just going to decide to start shutting people down. Being adaptive is really important, I think, and so we're looking to kind of have procedures in place to handle cases as they come through, but also be able to move those procedures or change those procedures, not be so tied to the forms that we aren't able to adapt when things pop up.
Oh, definitely. I think you really hit the nail on the head there, that being adaptable is super important, for law firms or really for anybody, because you never know what might happen. And being able to make those quick changes is very important. Something I talk a lot about with a lot of people is that, they might be stuck, in kind of I'm not going to give up mindset. So they keep trying the same thing over and over and over again. But even though having perseverance is very important, not giving up. But if something's not working, you don't need to give up necessarily. You might just need to try something else and move in a different direction, or be adaptable. Really, I think that's something very, very important for law firms to understand, and for really anybody to understand, really.
Absolutely. Getting tied to either what has worked in the past or what is most comfortable or even what is right can end up sinking things if all of a sudden the government decides, hey, we're just going to shut everyone down, and if you can't adapt to that, goodbye. Or something far less nefarious, a few years ago, they made marijuana legal. That eliminated an entire section of criminal law, but then it created a whole new section of business law. And so people who are adaptable and able to transition, they really profited a lot. I totally missed that boat, but a lot of people did really well there. And so being able to change like that with the environment is very helpful.
Definitely. No, I think so. I think I think that makes a lot of sense. And I know you kind of hinted on this a little bit, but I do want to address it again. When it comes to, obviously now it seems like you guys are on a little bit of an upswing with the increase in bankruptcy, but are you guys facing any challenges right now besides that, like internally, as a business structure, or, just the lack of cases coming in a particular area or something?
Yeah, actually, Social Security disability work has really dried up quite a bit. So there's a lot less available cases out there for that. And as far as the bankruptcy area goes, home values being high makes it more difficult for people to file for bankruptcy. And so we're seeing a lot of situations where someone really needs it, but they can't do it because their home's worth too much. So the higher home values are a bit of a challenge. We have some options to deal with it, but the options aren't as strong as we'd like. Beyond that, mostly recovering from last year. We've already adapted to the, offering telephone consultations and adjusting our procedures to be able to accommodate for the person not being in and therefore not having signed certain things. So getting those signatures, that sort of stuff, we were able to adapt to that somewhat early on. So that challenge was resolved, but then the current one is the home values.
Gotcha. Okay, no, that makes sense, and that brings up kind of my second to last question. I was going to ask, within the name of the group, Future Proof Your Law Firm, what besides just accepting phone calls for meetings, are there any other things that you can think of in your firm that you guys have done to kind of future proof your firm to allow for that kind of adaptability? Or maybe, I know you mentioned a little bit, trying to rank up high on Google for the search results rankings. Are there any new marketing strategies you guys have put into place, or anything like that?
Well, I'm personally a bit ignorant on the marketing side of things, but the guy who does that here, he does an amazing job, and that's probably the only reason we exist, is his ability to keep us at the number one spot on Google. Without that, there's not much you can do. You've got to be, at least in the top three, because people they're gonna skip over the ones that they know are ads. They're gonna skip over the ones that are just big aggregator sites. They're gonna look for real websites, and you want to be in one of the top 2 or 3 of those so that they even see you.
Definitely. No, I think that's very important. I know there's kind of a funny phrase that the best place to hide a dead body would be the second page of Google, because nobody ever goes there. It's very, even like you said, just being on that number 4 or 5 spot can lose you a lot of traffic. Getting as close to the top as possible is very important. I'm glad you guys have somebody on staff to help you out with all of that. That's excellent. And I hope other law firms can kind of start approaching that as well, because I talk to a lot that seem like they're kind of stuck in a old mentality mindset where they're still slow to start adapting some of these new digital formats. But being able to being able to be easily found on Google is essential to any modern business. I really think.
Oh yeah, I would say it is as important, if not more important, than knowing how to handle your accounting or doing your taxes or being able to hook up your computer. It's just as, if not more important than those things. And a lot of people do get stuck in those old ways. A lot of lawyers in the area, they're still taking out ads on the phone book. They're putting ads out on the radio. They've got billboards. The best way I can think of that is try and look at it from the mind of a consumer. If the power goes out in your house or you need plumbing or something, you're not going to look for your phone book. If you're driving down the road and you see a billboard, you're not going to remember the phone number on it. You're going to remember the keyword. Oh, bankruptcy. I should get home and Google that.
Yep.
And you pay $100 to drive business towards the person who got the website.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. No, I definitely think you got it right there for sure. Kind of having that consumer intent is very important, and just the way that you can target people with online advertising, unlike these other forms of advertising, I think is definitely superior. And I know it's a trend. The number of the ad spend for digital media is increasing dramatically, when the ad spend for more traditional forms of media are definitely decreasing, just because they're just not as effective. So that makes a lot of sense. And, I appreciate the insight in there.
Oh, absolutely.
My final question, and I really appreciate your time today, Jacob, is if you could give any advice to a law firm or an individual lawyer within their law firm that's maybe struggling right now, their practice is struggling. I know we kind of just hit something right there. Maybe they should get on Google. But what other advice would you give to them? Would really love to know.
Well, it's another thing we already touched on, but it's that act of developing a procedure, getting your templates in place, and having a flow when you get going is great, and it's productive and it's comfortable. But you have to be able to let those go when the situation changes, so that you can adapt and you can either change what you do in order to match the environment, or even change what you do in order to do better than the environment. It's more than just survival. If you can do a good job, like the people who transitioned from marijuana defense to marijuana business plans, they cleaned up. And so being able to do that can help you survive, but it can also help you do really, really well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that is awesome insight. I hope everybody listens to what Jacob said, because those are some true words of wisdom right there. Well, thank you again so much for being here, Jacob. I really appreciate your time. And thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. Appreciate it. Hope you got a lot of value. And we will see you in the next one.